Most hiring managers have no idea that to make one hire, the recruiter had to reach out to probably, one or 200 candidates,
It's incredibly
especially from a
complicated.
design thinking
Oh dear
standpoint,
God,
because
yeah, it's
this is the old spinning plate syndrome, right? You got
oh yeah,
spin plate over here, and then you. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Jeff with the 10X Recruiting Show, and I've got Trent Cotton, who is he's the author, forgot the word there, I almost said speaker, of Sprint Recruiting. Trent, welcome to the 10X podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I'm excited.
Fantastic. So you wrote this book. Why was there a need to write this book to begin with?
Oh wow. So in 2017, I went through kicking and screaming design thinking and agile transformation or agile training with the institution I was with, and kind of came out of the course and was a little intrigued because I started thinking, if agile and Scrum can help companies like Apple and Facebook and all the other little sexy companies that we admire, if they can help them be able to deliver products and services quickly and products and services that I like, there's got to be a way that we could do the same thing in recruiting. And so it started a journey. And what the book does is it goes through that journey with my team, all the hard knocks that we got to get to the point where we came up with the four disciplines or the four pitfalls first of how recruiting is normally done or traditional recruiting, and then the four disciplines of sprint recruiting, and just kind of walks people through how to implement it in their own organization or take pieces that they might find are helpful to kind of help them and implement it in sprints.
It's kind of interesting that you use the word discipline, right? Because I've taken design thinking and agile and Scrum and all that stuff, and been on product development teams, but then also led 1,500 recruiting teams, right?
Oh, wow.
So, it takes a lot to keep these teams organized, and it certainly takes a lot of discipline, right? Everybody likes following their own recruiting models, recruiting processes. Some of them are, if you were to put it on a whiteboard, it would take up like 30 different, steps in the process, and then micro steps and things like that. It just gets very unwieldy, right? So how have you kind of broken down the steps in the recruiting process?
Yeah, just listening to whiteboarding how most recruiting processes go just makes me a little anxious and gives me acid reflux because it's incredibly
Especially
complicated.
from a design thinking
Oh dear
standpoint,
God,
because
yeah, it's like just give me a straight line. How does a candidate get from here to here without all of these different little rabbit holes? So let's first look at kind of the rabbit hole that is traditional recruiting. You've got four major pitfalls. The first one is that everything is a priority, which means nothing is a priority. All right. Put yourself in, earlier today, you probably talked to a senior executive that said, this is a priority. We've got to get this one filled. And in the back of your head, within 24 to 48 hours, they're going to call and the priority is going to change. So what does that do for you? You lose time, you lose focus, you lose efficiency. It just doesn't work. The second one that I found is
this is the old spinning plate syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Spin plate over here, and then you spin the plate over there, and then this one's starting to fall.
Yeah, look over here. Don't bring anything up over here. The other thing that I found is that a lot of times, we were hiring a ton of people, but the line of business still, or our clients, internal clients, because I was in corporate recruiting, that they just didn't feel like we were doing anything. It was like we were just sitting over here twiddling our thumbs. So there was this misalignment. We were doing the work, but it wasn't the work that the client needed us to do because there was no definition of success, right?
Right. And there seems to be a huge disconnect between the amount of work that it takes to make the hire and the visibility or transparency into what actually goes into making that hire. Most hiring managers have no idea that to make one hire, the recruiter had to reach out to probably, 1 or 200 candidates, speak to 10 or 20 candidates, and then interview them, schedule them, and do all that stuff. And then times that by 20 or 30 recs that they got on their desk.
Yeah, but believe it or not, though, Jeff, that's kind of our fault.
Yeah, absolutely. We set the process, not them.
Oh, yeah. Go and call 20 candidates where, logically would go, why? You've got 5 traditional ones, but just being that recruiter, that service mind, it's like, all right, I'm going to go and do it. And then we turn around and we complain about it. But then we don't tell them how the sausage is made. I think if we did a better job of that, they would have some respect for some of the potholes and the landmines that we try to help the organization navigate through. And then the other is that there's no drum beat. So I'm a musician. I like playing whenever there's a drummer, because whatever the drummer counts as 4/4, that's what all of us are going to play for. And that's what the vocalist is going to be able to kind of keep the beat and understand where they need to be in the song. If the drummer's not there, I'm playing 4/4 one way. God forbid if the lead guitar had a Red Bull or an espresso before, because he's going to count it faster. And you've got just this.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so all of us are playing the same song, but just at different beats. And the vocalist is up there sounding like probably like a howling cat, because they can't figure out, where am I supposed to come in? But if you have that drummer, there's a beat there. And right now in traditional recruiting, there's no beat. It's almost like that Lucille Ball clip where she's in there in the factory, in the chocolate factory, and they turn the belt up and she's just stuffing stuff. That's recruiting, especially now. We've got more jobs, fewer candidates, all of these laborious processes. It's just a disaster. And the last one is the feedback loop is broken / doesn't exist, or is one-sided. And I'm talking about the managers, and I get a lot of heat for some of the stuff that I try to post out there on LinkedIn to be funny to start a conversation, but apparently there is this mantra that I hate hiring managers. I don't. I just wish that they understood, to our earlier point, everything that goes involved, and all they have to do is give us quick feedback.
Yeah.
So those were kind of
that's all. Just quick feedback. That's all we ask for, right?
That's all. Yes. And if we're off track, help us. We'll tighten the scope up. So it's a win-win.
But so let's kind of summarize those 4 things, right? Everything's a priority, so nothing's a priority.
Right.
That was the first thing. The next one was there was a lack of direction or rhythm to the process. So you can never get hammered into a really good rhythm. The next one is recruiters are often misaligned to whatever the business needs are. So they're off recruiting for, let's say, R&D when they should be recruiting for sales or something. And then the feedback process is either chaotic or inefficient, if it even exists at all, right?
Right. It's usually the latter, unfortunately.
Right.
So coming out of that training and going through kind of getting back into my day-to-day, I started noticing just these 4 obstacles. And I said, all right, let's apply some, let's kind of get into it. Let's do some design thinking. Let's do some Agile. And it was really listening to the book by Jeff Sutherland, Scrum. He's the one that kind of invented it. I remember I was driving on a long road trip, and I just about ran off the road because about halfway through it, he started talking about the point system. And then I go, that's it. And what I said had a lot more superlatives in it, so we'll keep it very PG. But I was like really excited. So over time, through a lot of different testings and iterations, we came up with the 4 disciplines of sprint recruiting. So the first,
before you get into those 4 disciplines, though, I just realized something. There may be some people listeing that have not gone through Agile, not gone through Scrum training, or not gone through design thinking.
Very good point.
Why don't we back up? Really quickly, I've been doing design thinking sessions for probably 8, 9 years now, right? So I know what it is, but give me a quick definition of what a design thinking session is.
All right. So let's talk about design thinking, then we'll talk about Agile / Scrum, because they're the same, dependent but different. All right. Design thinking is, how do we design something with the client at the center of the process? So you develop like personas. If I'm developing a product and I want to go after college students, that's a persona. And everything that I do, I'm trying to bounce it against, does that meet the needs of that particular demographic or age group in the college example? So it's just really kind of going through that ideation phase, the testing phase, the prototype, and continuously being able to refine that product in iterations. That is something that you actually want. And fantastic example is what most of us have in our hands is an iPhone. They went through some design thinking, and it was the design thinking that got it started. And there's a story that I heard from one of the developers when they were kind of going through and developing the app, and or developing an app. It wasn't the iPhone, but there was they were trying to develop this app for a boutique or a group of boutiques, and they were going through the design thinking. So they went through the ideation, and they brought in some clients. They asked for some feedback, and they thought they had the cat's meow whenever it came to the app. This one client said, it'd be fantastic is over half the time, I can't remember where the boutiques are or when they're having the sale or whatever. If I've got my maps on, it'd be awesome if they could just like pop up and go, hey, you're close to the boutique and we got a sale. She goes, I'd probably go in and spend a lot of money. Non-design thinking never would have caught that. and never would have been able to put that one little feature on that probably escalated their sales by north of 30%. That's the benefit of design thinking. And to be honest, it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Yes, love it.
Oh my God, for curious people like me, it's like, all right, well, where in the world did you come up with that? And asking for that client feedback. So that's design thinking. Is, I think you would probably agree, Jeff, is succinct as we can get it. Now let's switch over to Agile. So you kind of got your product. Now you need to deliver it, and you need to do it quickly, but still involving that client feedback. That's where the Agile methodology comes in. And so what it does is it takes this huge project and breaks it into what you call sprints. Normally it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 4 weeks. But what it does is it takes that big section. So let's use that app as an example. We got that feedback from a client. We need to build in that GPS capability. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and look at my entire project and say, you know what, some of these other things can be pushed back. I'm going to work in my team of cross-functional individuals, software development, the product design, anyone that has anything to do with that particular capability for the next 2 weeks or the next 2 sprints, which would be a month, we're going to work on that and be able to deliver it out. And at the end of that sprint or sprints, you go back to the client, get them to test it, get feedback. And then once that part is done, you move on to the next section. So you can build this really amazing app that in traditional project management, it would take you a year and a half that you would probably deliver something that was outdated or not really client centric. With the combination of design thinking and Agile, putting those together, you can do it quicker. It's client based. You're getting that feedback almost in real time, and you're able to build a better product that's actually going to be used by your client. So at the end of the day, I'm kind of like you. It's like I can't unwire my brain out of the Scrum, Agile, all of that methodology. I mean, I even do it with my daughter for her college homework. We do sprints, and I make her plan her 2 weeks so we can make sure that we get those grades. So I mean, it permeates all of your life once you get into it.
Yeah. So kind of summarize that. Design thinking is really to identify the specific problem that a specific user or audience would have, and then iterating new innovative solutions around that specific problem and how you do it. Agile is how you go about tackling the implementation of the design thinking solution that you can, right? So somebody has to build the solution, right? Typically, it's dealing with software developers, hardware engineers, things like that. But in your case, you're not doing it to deliver an end software solution.
Right.
You're doing it for a service. So there was a little bit
Correct.
of a twist in yours, right? So how did you
Yeah.
handle that issue?
Yeah, that was a mind bend. So what I kept coming back to those 4 pitfalls, and I said, all right, let me just address these pitfalls using those methodologies and everything that I've learned. Let's just address those and see if we can find a solution. So over time, we started putting in some of the Scrum aspect of it, which is the process of the methodology of Agile. And so we came up with the disciplines. And the first one is, in order to get rid of everything as a priority, we put the definition of prioritization and success in the hands of where it belongs. It's not the recruiters, it's the client. So Jeff, if you've got 40 positions, I'm going to come to you and say, which ones are the most important? So what the very first thing is that the sprint, as over the next 2 weeks, these 50 jobs, you and I both know I am limited by time, resources, and focus. That's any organization, recruiting included. So with those 3 constraints over the next 2 weeks, these 50 roles, which ones are the most important? So I'm taking this huge thing and already breaking it into a bite-sized punch, right? But I'm also putting a time limit on there that we can evaluate that process. Next comes in, I want you to define that priority with a number, with qualitative. Now, a lot of companies will do small, medium, large, red, yellow, green, all of that. We tried all of that. Our business people are numbers people. So why not talk to them in their language? Put points on it. So again, Jeff, you have 50 jobs over the next 2 weeks. Which ones are the most important? Okay, now we've got these 15. I'm going to give you 200 points or $200 of my time over the next 2 weeks. Of these 15, I want you to allocate a dollar amount for each one of those. So let's just say you do 60, 20, 40, whatever that is. So now I've gotten you to prioritize and then even further define that definition of success. Then it comes into, in Agile, you have work in progress limits. So what that means is once you reach a certain limit of whatever you're measuring, you stop. Think of it as a domino, all right? You tip that first one, that energy tips into the next one, And that's how you kind of build up toward the end. And whips work the same way. So what we do is we look at the number of candidates. All right, how many do we have in each stage of the process? Now think of normal recruiting. You go, you find 5 fantastic candidates for this role. You give them over to the manager interviews them, they take their sweet time giving you feedback, but by the time they actually do, they say, hey, go and find me 5 or 10 more. You do that for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they only go back and hire one of the first 4 or 5, and then they're surprised they're no longer in the market, especially in today's market, because they wasted too much time. All the while, you've wasted time and focus. So whips help that. Think of 3 swim lanes: the recruiter swim lane, which is sourcing and interviewing, the hiring manager submitted lane, and then the hiring manager interview lane. So what's going to happen is you've got your prioritization. Let's say our biggest point role is that 60 pointer. My job in that sprint, and especially in the first part, is to allocate my time, my resources, my focus around getting to that whip limit on that first role. So I want to make sure that once Jeff has 5 candidates either sitting in his submitted box or he is scheduled to interview, I stop working on Jeff. I go and work on the next one in priority. That's where that drumbeat comes in. It helps also with the hiring managers, because over time they realize they're not going to get more candidates unless they give us feedback, because we're at our whip limit. And that's what number 4 is a 48-hour turnaround time on feedback. So imagine, we've got the Lucille ball where, there's chocolate flying everywhere, which is how recruiting is done today. Now we've got almost like this stop and go domino effect. Candidates are interviewed by a recruiter, their hiring manager submitted, we hit our 5 or whatever your whip limit is. You hit that 5, you stop working on that role, you work on the next one, and you hit that next target, and then you work on the next one. And hopefully over time, you get feedback on that 60 pointer, and then you go back to that 60 pointer and say, okay, of these 5, you like 3. I'm going to go and schedule these 3 for interview. Here are 5 more, and then you go right back to what you were working on. And then over the end of the 2 weeks, you're sitting with your client and say, let's do a retro. You set 200 points. I hit 160, so I hit 80% of the goal. Let me tell you what worked. Hiring manager A and B, they were fantastic. They gave me feedback within 24 hours. They helped me define the search a little bit better. We found fantastic candidates and filled more roles than we actually thought we would be able to. Candidate C, or excuse me, hiring manager C decided that they were going to go on vacation and didn't tell me. So I had all these candidates and I was doing all this work, and then I lost them, and it was lost time for candidates. It was a lost time for recruiters. And guess what? We're back to square one. So you have that conversation. And then the flip side happens. The clients can tell the recruiting leaders or the recruiting team, this is where you missed. This really worked for us. Can you do more of X and Y and Z? So now you're going into the next sprint ready to iterate for growth. You're going to avoid those obstacles or deal with them. And then you're going to find things that work for the manager that maybe you didn't think was that big of a deal, but it's something that you can scale quickly. And oh, by the way, you got a scorecard every 2 weeks to show how recruiting is meeting the definition of success set by the client.
I think that scorecard is probably the most critical keystone in that whole thing. I think the entire structure would not stand up if it didn't have that feedback loop, right? And this is one of the critical things inside of design thinking and also inside of Agile Scrum is you have to get a feedback loop going, right? And I think that in most organizations, that recruiter hiring manager feedback loop is broken or massively dysfunctional, which means the entire thing breaks down. We used to do, when I was in one of the major RPOs, we did very much the same thing. We didn't call it a sprint recruiting, but it basically was. We had a timeline for generating a list of a minimum of 10 qualified, interested, available candidates. And that's what the sourcing whip was. And then we needed to pass those 10 candidates off to the recruiter, and his or her job was to reconcile those candidates within 48 hours and then get us feedback, right?
Right.
And then if they got down to 5 candidates, they could order another 10. So we would just keep that cycle going. So the whole objective was to keep them calling at least 10 candidates on every single requisition, because we found 20 was too many, 30 way too many, 10 is a manageable. Oh yeah, I spoke to this person. They can remember 10 off the top of their head. And yep, those 5 candidates are done. I'm reaching out to the next 5, et cetera. Especially if you've got a recruiter sourcer kind of working in tandem, it
Right.
works really well.
Right.
But one thing that we never worked out was that feedback loop. And it's mostly because we were the RPO, right? So we didn't have that. Sometimes we didn't have
Yeah.
that as a third party, external company. We didn't have that relationship with the hiring manager, but I love that feedback loop. So how do you kind of capture this feedback loop? Is it the recruiter hiring manager responsibility? Is it the manager of recruiting or staffing? Who's doing this
Both.
feedback loop?
It's
Okay.
both. So whenever we implement this, or I'm training an organization, I tell the recruiters and the hiring managers, look, no one can hide in this. So recruiters, if you're not doing all of the lead measures to get those candidates to be able to hit those whips, this report is going to show it. Managers, if I see that, we've got hiring managers submitted for 48 hours and on this particular requisition and it's got points on it, trust me, I'm going to know. And I'm going to start asking the recruiter, and then I'm going to come and ask you. And oh, by the way, I'm going to copy your senior level executive. So there's kind of like an escalation. So the recruiter first engages the manager, and if they go AWOL, they engage their manager. The manager will kind of go one level up and try to get some feedback. If they don't respond to them, then I get involved, and I just bypass everyone. I go directly to the divisional head, and the subject line is usually iced. So and ICE is I've called and cared enough. And usually the email goes something like this. Dear John, you indicated that X role at 50 points was one that was really critical. Over the last 3 days, we have reached out to the hiring manager. We've reached out to their boss asking for feedback on the candidates that have been submitted. As you know, all of us are constrained by resources, so I'm going to ICE this position, meaning we are not going to work on this position until the next sprint unless we get some feedback. Just wanted you to know. And then I copy the recruiter saying, Jeff, go ahead and work on the next one in priority and let us know if you hear from the manager. Thanks. Usually only has to happen
Are
once.
you actually publishing a calendar of your sprint?
Oh,
So
yeah. Oh, we've got
Okay.
no. We've got a report. I used Google Data Studio, and it shows everyone in the organization has access to it. So even down to the level of what the roles are, all the the rec ID, when it was open, the sprint, and then general notes. Every manager has access to that in the organization.
Awesome.
Just the more transparent you can be, the more it becomes a hiring partnership, and rather than this typical adversarial role that you have between recruiters and hiring managers. But also it's got a dashboard. So the very first thing you see is how many points do we have as an organization in each one of the different steps. So sourcing, hiring manager, interview, submitted, offer, done. How many points are sitting in each one of those different levels? And then right beneath it, you have the number of requisitions. So if I've got 500 positions on day 2, and let's just say 300 of them are sitting with sourcing, meaning we don't have any candidates, we're kind of starting from scratch, I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with that by day 7, because that means that we're not doing something that we need to. And as a leader, that's a really quick indicator for me to go into the recruiting team and say, where do you need help? Are you running into obstacles? So it helps leaders spend less time managing the chaos and more time leading the charge.
Are the recruiters updating this Google Studio document, or the
Well,
sourcers, everybody who's
everyone. So the sourcers, the recruiters, think of it kind of like a spreadsheet, and then Data Studio puts it in a nice little portal type of way. So you've got bar charts, anything that you need to know right there very quickly. It's a very succinct. I like Da Vinci's thing, the ultimate form of sophistication, simplicity. So it's very simple, kind of left to right, what's going on, and anyone can drill down all the way down to their business unit level and see the points and the progress just for their particular business unit, but it's updated with the recruiter on the back end.
Okay. So it's not integrating with your ATS or CRM and dynamically pulling data out. And
Did you just say ATS and dynamic in the same? Did I mishear you? Oh God, don't even get me started. I love my ATS companies. I really do. I mean, they're trying so hard, but it's like the ATS industry was born to be able to satisfy the needs of HR and the process over people. And now they're trying to like get out of that and get in with the times. And I applaud them, because they've got a very uphill battle. But no, I pull it out every 2 weeks, throw it into, we use Smartsheet, throw it into Smartsheet, And the thing I like about Smartsheet is that the recruiters are able to put it into card view, so like a Kanban or swim lane, and they're able to just move those recs really easily. Because I don't want to add another report on top of a report. I want them to be able to have a tool that helps them manage their work. And the benefit on the back end is that we can build a dashboard to be able to communicate with our clients. So, for instance, right now I can tell you how many points we have in each lane, how many positions we have in each stage of the process. I can probably forecast within about 80% how we'll close out the end of the week. And based off where we are this time tomorrow, so, it's what, 2 o'clock on a Thursday, usually about 4 o'clock on a Friday, I can just about forecast how we're going to end that sprint based off of some knowledge and tracking and analytics.
And just to give us an idea, how many requisitions are you working on? How many recruiters?
500, and we've got 16, 18 recruiters. And in my previous organization, we were running well north of that with, I had 33 direct reports, recruiters.
So this is not a little organization, everybody.
No.
This is, and this kind of level of organization, if you will, organization on top of a company, if you will, you really need to have it, right? Because if not, with 10 or 20 open requisitions a month, any one single recruiter can handle that. But once you start adding layers of complexity with number of recruiters and number of hiring managers or departments that are being serviced,
levels of positions. I mean, even within
what positions, it gets massively complex. So you really need to have something like Google Studio to kind of manage this all together. When we were in the RPO, we were doing 120,000 hires a year. We were servicing 90 different countries, 28 different languages, and at any given time, we had 4,000 or 5,000 open requisitions on our recruiters' desks, and we went from 500 recruiters up to 1,500 recruiters worldwide. So it's a lot to manage, right?
It is, and the we kind of started the whole topic of talking about how laborious the process is. So you've got all of this noise in the process. I like the analytics because I can tune everything else out and go, what is the data telling me? And I've done this long enough, not just because I created, but I've done it long enough in multiple different organizations across industries, and I can start to see little tickers and go, there's a question there. Let me dig into it. It doesn't tell me the answer, but it tells me dig further, and it helps you be able to have a competitive edge. So, my current organization, whenever I started about a year ago, we had this one division, pretty high volume, entry-level roles, had 85, 90 positions on average for probably the first 60 days. Had an opening on the team, and I brought over someone from my previous institution who had never been in recruiting, and all she knew was sprint. And I remember whenever I extended her offer and she accepted my client was like, "Oh, I'm so excited." I said, "You say that now." Just understand, she's a machine. And I mean, it just lives and breathes this process. And we were actually, we were losing business. We were losing contracts because we didn't have enough manpower to be able to put the product out that we needed, right? Fast forward 6 months, got them into shape. We identified that the feedback loop was incredibly broken. We also identified several issues that were going on in the process. And every 2 weeks, we were talking about what's going on in the candidate market. So we were getting more candidates. We were able to respond quicker to changes in compensation in that market, quicker than our competitors, because we were meeting every 2 weeks, and they had little meetings in between. So they were kind of doing mini sprints in between the big sprint. Fast forward 6 months, we're expanding. Like, they're opening offices because we're getting more contracts, because we're able to beat our competitors by getting the product out quicker and being able to do it in a higher service delivery, because we also fixed the quality candidate that we were going after. So in this sprint process, not only did we lower the requisition amount, but we increased the quality, we increased the relationship, and it gave us a competitive edge. And now they sit probably around, I think, 14 or 15 open positions, because it's just a machine now. They've got it. It works. They have their drumbeat.
So because of the current marketplace, right, we've got a ton more people retiring. We've got, people that pass away from COVID that aren't in the marketplace anymore. They can't be a candidate. people being displaced, things like that. How has, your sprint recruiting methodology or platform, whatever you want to call it, how has it really been able to evolve with the new era of recruiting that we're in now?
The methodology didn't need to evolve. All it does is it helps us be able to identify all of those landmines quicker. So if you think about traditional recruiting, you get a report at the end of the month for the previous month or middle of the month. Then you're looking at your time to fill. Then you're looking at your survey scores. Then you're looking at the number of openings, and it's all retro. You can't go look back in the last 18 months. If you're looking back 30 days, guess what? Everything's changed by then. So what this does is it keeps us current. We're starting first, and I'm looking at the data just about daily. My team will tell you, I love William Denning's quote, "In God we trust, everyone else must bring data." But I'm always looking at it. And it's not, let me make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. It's let me see if I can read through the data, almost like the matrix, and see if there's a landmine ahead that I need to help them navigate through. Or if the trends start going down about middle of the sprint, I'm picking up the phone, calling the recruiter, and calling the manager and saying, what's going on? Do we need help? Do we need more resources? What's going on in the talent market? So we're having those conversations almost every other day, which helps us be able to stay abreast of it. So the methodology doesn't need to evolve because we've built almost like a catalyst for evolution and evolutionary conversations repeatedly throughout the sprint.
So if somebody wanted to kind of get started in your sprint recruiting methodology, how would they go about doing that?
So take some time. I wrote a book, and you're going to have some thick skin because my language is like a sailor and I write like a sailor too. So I try to have a little bit of fun with it, but kind of go through it because you're going to see some of the knocks that we had, some of the lessons that we learned, and I'll walk you through almost step by step how to implement each of the different disciplines. So if you want to start with just the feedback and tiptoe in that, work on that for 4 weeks or whatever the determined period of time is, and then maybe take on looking at a sprint. How many jobs are we going to fill without everything else? How many jobs do we fill every 2 weeks? And then talk about it with your team. So there's ways that you can tiptoe into this. And I outline it in the book and also on my blog, sprintrecruiting.com. I give a couple of examples of companies that go, I like that, but I'm just going to work on let me fix the feedback loop and then we'll start worrying about everything else. And then I've had other companies that just go all in and, get beat up a little bit, but they work with their client and say, let's try something new because what we've been doing is not working, and both of us agree to that. So it's very much a mutual partnership. If you want to go all in, what I would suggest is everybody has those groups in any organization that you go, God, I just love working with them. They pick up the phone, they need something, they automatically go to the priority because they're just fantastic to work with. They're innovative, they're willing to take risk, willing to try new things. That's the group that you want to try and test this out with, and make sure that there's some open feedback, that they will criticize the process and help you build it to a way that it can implement. And that's what we did at the bank whenever I started developing this with the team at the time. We had 4 groups that we supported. All of us kind of leaned toward one. It wasn't even a discussion. It's like, hey, we need to go to this group. And that client group helped us build this out. And the beauty is that they knew Agile. So I didn't have to explain Agile to them. They knew what the process was, and they helped us build it and build out the scorecard. And then time over time, we started rolling it out to other parts of the organization. And every time we did it, we reduced the time to fill, which I hate that metric, but everybody loves it. So we reduced the time to fill on average by the second or third sprint. So 4 or 6 weeks in, we reduced about 24% on average.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then do you guys track cost per hire at all? Has it impacted that at all?
It hasn't really impacted the cost per hire, again, because the methodology is to get everyone on the same page. But what it does allow leaders to do is once you get all of that noise, it doesn't fix all of it, but it fixes about 80% of the noise that you deal with being a daycare manager, also known as a TA leader in today's world. You get the daycare under control, then you can start looking at the cost per hire. Then you can start looking at, do I have the right people in the right spots? Do I have them aligned with the right part of the organization based off of their skill set and their passions? You can start really getting into leading and not being managed by the whirlwind of everyday life.
All right. I'll put a link to the book on Amazon. I think it's listed there. And then I'll also put a link to your website so everybody can just go to the description and everything to get all that. Any last thoughts here, Trent?
Oh gosh, no. We could talk for days about this kind of stuff, but no, my biggest advice is dive in, even if you just take one step. Sometimes it's just that first step that you got to get over, and just fall down the hill like the rest of us do, but learn along the way.
Yeah, do it elegantly though. Follow
Oh yeah. Oh
follow
yeah.
a systemized process.
Yeah.
What I can't stand is like recruiters just jump in and then they have no idea what they do or are
Hmm.
doing, and they create more chaos than is really necessary in the recruiting process.
Yeah.
Also, what I loved about design thinking, especially, is that if you identify the problem and you're not identifying the real problem, then you have to iterate a new solution.
Totally.
Understand that the first time you do something, whether it's riding a bike or implementing a new recruiting process, it's not always going to work 100%, right?
Hmm.
You're going to make a ton of mistakes. Your feedback loop, maybe it's not efficient because you're sending it to a Slack channel and nobody's in Slack all day long,
Right.
or you're going through email and no, I get 300 emails a day, so I'm not reading it. So
Hmm.
you may need to figure out, okay, what is that feedback loop that everybody can agree on and that can be monitored on a regular basis?
Hmm.
What is our sprint efficiency? Is it 2 weeks? We had 7 day, 2 week, and 4 week, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
because some of our things were very critical and we needed to hit a hiring class and we needed to get 15 people, butts in seats on September 15th, or else we were getting fired. So
Ah, gotcha. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you figure
And
out what your sprint process is, and same thing with your prioritization, right? Not every rec is a major priority, like we said
mhm.
before.
Yeah, what's interesting though, just real quick tidbit. The biggest hump that everyone has to get over, and hiring managers especially, is, well, what about the roles that don't have points? Well, in the book, I kind of outline a way to do extra credit. So everything has a point value. And then just imagine being able to look at a graph and see how many sprint roles you filled versus how many non-sprint roles you filled. And over time, as we were able to fix this and start fixing some of our other areas of the process that needed to be done, we started noticing that not only were we filling more sprint roles, we were also filling more non-sprint roles. So it was a
Hmm.
double win. We went from filling an average of, let's just say, 40 every 2 weeks within this one division. And once we tightened up that process, the feedback loop, all four of the disciplines, once everyone got locked in, within 90 days, we went from an average of 40 every 2 weeks to an average of 60 to 90.
But
Who
it
benefits
it
from that?
took you a few months to do that, right?
It
Because
does. Hmm.
all these new things are creating new habits, especially for the
Yes.
recruiter and for the hiring manager.
Hmm.
And it doesn't happen overnight. You need a few weeks for it to kind of, settle, get the sediment out of the water, if you will, and then
Right.
you can start back up again.
Yeah.
Develop your process, implement it. We used to implement things in stages. We had a staged approach. Typically, it was a 3 or 4 stage approach with
Mm.
bringing on new clients. And we knew that the first 3 months, there's a lot of chaos. You're bringing on a lot of new people, things like that. And then it kind of stabilizes, sediment falls out, and then you can stir up the water a little bit more.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. And there's a quote from one of the movies from Marvel. I think it's called The Ten Rings. Um, and an elderly lady was they were practicing bow and arrow or something, and one of the characters was trying to make sure that she was lining everything up, and it took her like 5 minutes to pull the arrow back. And the older lady comes by and she says, "If you aim for nothing, you hit nothing." And it just kind of stuck with me because a lot of times I get asked, okay, what part do I tackle first? And it's just look at the target and pull, and learn along the way. And the framework is breathable, so it can amend to whatever the desires are of your client. It's not so stringent. It's like you've got to follow this. It's a nice framework for you to be able to be successful. So you'll fall. It's okay, but you're not going to fall all the way to the bottom of the hill. There's going to be some ways that you can stop, dust yourself off, and go, okay, well, that wasn't the way to go. What's the right way to go? And it's kind of attacking this, or using this mindset of, I don't fail, I learn. And that's probably been the biggest lesson for me throughout this journey.
yeah, I always say fail fast forward, right? So it
Right.
doesn't matter whether you fail because you're out of that place anyway. So you
Hmm.
failed forward. All right, everybody. Trent Cotton, thank you so much. He's the
Thank
author
you.
of Sprint Recruiting Methodology. It's his attempt to address all the different, things going on inside of the recruiting process with an easy to follow, cohesive process to really execute both for recruiters and hiring managers and the recruiter and the clients that you're serving. The book is going to be listed down below as well as his website and everybody. So
awesome.
Trent,
Thank you, Jeff.
thank you again.
All right. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.